10,000 demons tempt a saint at the hour of death when a soul was on the verge of death. 10,000 demons came to tempt him. However, through fervent prayers to the Virgin Mary, he was saved. The chronicler of the life of Saint Andrew Avellino recounted that as many as 10,000 demons came to tempt the saint on his deathbed. In his final moments, the saint endured a fierce battle with the forces of hell, so intense that the monks standing around him were filled with terror and dread. His face became swollen and darkened, reflecting the turmoil of his soul, and his limbs trembled uncontrollably. In his agonized struggle, his muscles and veins tensed and twisted, tears flowed abundantly, and his head turned back and forth as though torn between two opposing forces. This vividly illustrated the intense battle he was waging against the demons of hell. Everyone who witnessed his agonizing final moments wept with compassion, intensifying their prayers and trembling in fear to see such a saint endure this ordeal. However, one thing gave them solace. The saint continually gazed at an image of the Virgin Mary, as if pleading for her help. Throughout his life, the saint had declared that at the hour of his death, the Virgin Mary would be his refuge. Indeed, God rewarded him with a glorious victory in the end. The convulsions and trembling subsided, his face relaxed, becoming serene and radiant, and his peaceful eyes fixed upon the image of the Virgin Mary. He bowed his head in reverence as if to express his gratitude to her. It is believed that the Virgin Mary appeared to him at that moment. Then, in quiet peace and sacred composure, he breathed his last in the loving hands of the Blessed Mother, who had protected him throughout his life. At the same time, a Franciscan nun, who was also on her deathbed, turned to her sisters and said, "Pray the Hail Mary, for a saint has just passed away." For those who cherish a deep devotion to the Virgin Mary during their lifetime, she will stand by them at the hour of death and at the judgment seat. The Virgin Mary is always swift to come to the aid of her beloved servants in their dying moments. She accompanies them, eases their passage to the afterlife, comforts them, and leads them to stand confidently before the judgment throne. The Blessed Virgin Mary once said to Saint Bridget, "I am the Queen of Mercy, the mother of all of you. I will come to you so that you may find joy and comfort in your final hour." Saint Vincent added that the Queen of Compassion would embrace the souls of the dying in her mantle of mercy and bring them before the judgment seat of her Son, where they would receive eternal happiness. Mary's intervention was similarly evident in the story of Cazzolo, the son of Saint Zita. Cazzolo, who had lived a dangerous life as a soldier, died far from his mother. Saint Bridget worried about his soul's salvation, but the Virgin Mary revealed to her that he had been saved. Mary had come to assist him in his final moments, guiding him on what he needed to do to save his soul as a reward for the ardent devotion he had shown to her throughout his life. At the same time, Saint Bridget saw a vision of Jesus seated on his throne and heard demons accusing Mary of two actions: helping Cazzolo resist their schemes at the hour of his death and directly leading his soul to the judgment seat, rescuing him from their grasp. Finally, Saint Bridget witnessed Jesus expelling the demons and Cazzolo's soul being taken to heaven. Those who dedicate themselves to Mary are bound by ties of immense grace. At the hour of their death, they will find rest in her embrace. Father Benet recounted the story of a faithful servant of Mary who received special assistance from her in his last moments. Before taking his final breath, the man said, "Father, if you knew the joy one feels at the hour of death because of a life devoted to Mary, you would be amazed and comforted." He further expressed, "I cannot describe the overwhelming joy filling my soul as you stand near me." Father Suazet, another devout servant of Mary, declared that he would willingly exchange all his talents and intellect for the merit of one Hail Mary. On his deathbed, he experienced such great consolation and joy that he exclaimed, "I never imagined death could be so sweet." Saint Peter Damian shared the story of his brother Martino, who had once gravely offended God. To atone for his sins, Martino approached an altar dedicated to Mary and voluntarily consecrated himself as her servant. Placing a chain around his neck to symbolize his servitude, he said, "O Mary, you are the shining model of purity, and I am a wretched sinner who has offended both God and you. The only recourse I have is to offer myself as your servant. Please do not reject me, despite my sinful past. Look mercifully upon my offering of devotion." Martino placed money on the altar, vowing to make an annual offering as a testament to his servitude to Mary. Sometime later, he fell gravely ill. One morning, Martino suddenly cried out, stand up, all of you, and honor my queen." He continued, "O Queen of Heaven, how great is the grace you have bestowed upon me. You have deigned to visit your servant." Martino then pleaded, "O my queen, please bless me and do not let me perish, for you yourself have come to visit me in such a manner." His brother Damiano rushed to his side and heard Martino recount how he had just seen the Virgin Mary and received her blessing. Martino also lamented that those present had not stood up to honor Mary when she arrived. Shortly after, Martino passed away peacefully in the Lord. The deaths of the rich and the poor often differ in the eyes of men and before God. On one occasion, the parish priest of a church was summoned to assist a wealthy man who was near death. Upon arriving, the priest saw a grand house, lavishly decorated with relatives and servants bustling about. However, the priest also noticed a pack of demons, like wild dogs, waiting to seize the man's soul. Indeed, the rich man had refused to confess his sins or receive the last sacraments, and his soul was ultimately taken by the demons. At the same time, a poor woman was also on her deathbed. She requested that someone invite the parish priest to bring her the Eucharist. Since the priest was occupied with the wealthy man, he sent another priest in his place. When this priest arrived at the poor woman's home, he saw no servants or valuable possessions. She lay on a simple bed of straw, but her room was filled with a strange, radiant light. Beside the dying woman, the priest saw the Virgin Mary comforting her, wiping the sweat from her brow as she endured her pain. Overwhelmed with surprise, the priest hesitated, but Mary signaled for him to come in. The Virgin herself pulled out a chair for the priest to sit and hear the woman's confession. After she fervently received the Eucharist, the woman peacefully passed away in the arms of Mary. Another story tells of a nobleman deeply devoted to the Virgin Mary. He had built a small chapel on his estate and placed a beautiful image of Mary there. He often visited the chapel to pray, even late at night, offering fervent prayers to her. However, his wife began to grow suspicious because he left the house quietly each night and returned only after some time. Her doubts caused her great distress. One day, she gathered the courage to ask him if he was in love with another woman. The nobleman smiled and replied, "Yes, I am in love with a woman of unparalleled beauty. I have given her my whole heart, and if I were to stop loving her, I might as well die." He was referring to the Virgin Mary and the deep love and devotion he held for her. However, still doubting him and wanting to uncover the truth, his wife pressed further, asking, "Do you visit her every night?" Unaware of the tragic consequences his words would have, he confidently answered, which led his distraught wife to make a devastating decision. She resolved to end her own life. That night, as usual, he left the room to pray. Meanwhile, she took a knife and cut her own throat. After completing his customary prayers, he returned to their room. As he got into bed, he noticed it was soaked. Calling out to his wife and receiving no response, he lit the lamp and was horrified to find the bed covered in blood and his wife lifeless. Completely shaken, he realized what had happened. In his anguish, he locked the room and went to the chapel, throwing himself at the feet of the statue of the Virgin Mary. He wept bitterly, crying out, "O Mother, do you see my suffering? If you do not console me, to whom shall I turn? If only I had not come here to honor you, my beloved would not have lost her soul. O Mother, only you can heal this terrible tragedy. Please save me." Prayers offered with deep faith are always answered by Mary. After his fervent pleading, a servant came to fetch him, saying that his wife was calling for him. At first he could not believe it and sent the servant back to verify. When the servant returned and insisted that she was indeed waiting for him, he rushed back. Upon opening the door, he found his wife alive, kneeling at his feet, weeping and asking for forgiveness. She cried out, "My husband, the Virgin Mary, has saved me from hell." Both were overwhelmed with tears of joy and went together to the chapel to thank the Virgin Mary. The following day, the nobleman held a feast and invited relatives and friends to celebrate the miracle. During the gathering, his wife recounted the miraculous event and showed the scar on her neck. Everyone who witnessed this extraordinary occurrence found their love and devotion to the Virgin Mary greatly increased.
Another story, told by Saint Antoninus, speaks of a man who had lived a sinful and dissolute life. One night, he dreamed that he stood before the judgment seat of Jesus. Demons acted as accusers, while the Virgin Mary defended him as his advocate. The demons presented a long scroll filled with his sins, which they placed on the scales of justice. The weight of his sins caused the scales to tip heavily, lifting the side of his good deeds. At that moment, the Virgin Mary gently placed her hand on the side of the good deeds, tipping the scale in his favor. Mary explained that he could be forgiven if he chose to reform his life. After waking from the dream, the man abandoned his sinful ways and began living a virtuous life. Lastly, in a simple yet profound act of devotion, another individual always recited a Hail Mary whenever passing by an image or statue of the Virgin Mary. The Venerable Father John Hesotti, who humbly regarded himself as a disciple of the Virgin Mary, shared the story of a man who lived a sinful and wayward life, estranged from God's grace. This man had a virtuous wife who tirelessly sought to lead her husband away from his life of sin. After much pleading, she finally persuaded him to perform a simple act, to recite a Hail Mary whenever he passed an image or statue of the Virgin Mary. To their surprise, this small gesture led to a great miracle. One night, as the man was on his way to commit sin, he suddenly saw a faint light flickering in the distance. Curious, he approached and discovered it was an oil lamp burning before a statue of the Virgin Mary holding the child Jesus. Remembering his promise to his wife, he recited a Hail Mary. Immediately, he saw the child Jesus appear, his body covered with wounds oozing blood. The sight shocked him, and he realized that his sins were the cause of the Lord's suffering. He wept bitterly, but the child Jesus turned away and refused to look at him. Deeply ashamed, the man turned to the Virgin Mary and pleaded, "O Mother, your son has rejected me. I entrust myself to you, Mother of God and my powerful advocate. Please intercede for me." The Virgin Mary appeared and reproached him. "You call me the Mother of Mercy, yet you continue to grieve me by tormenting my son." Despite her words of rebuke, she was moved with compassion for the sinner kneeling at her feet. She turned to the child Jesus and begged him to forgive the man. At first, the child Jesus refused, but then Mary knelt down, placed him on the pedestal, and said, "My son, I will not rise until you grant forgiveness to this sinner." Jesus replied, "O Mother, I cannot deny you. If you wish it, I will forgive him." Jesus then told the man to approach and kiss his wounds. As the man did so, the wounds on Jesus' body gradually disappeared. Finally, Jesus embraced and kissed him, signifying complete forgiveness. From that moment, the man underwent a profound conversion. He lived a holy life and devoted himself entirely to loving the Virgin Mary, who had obtained for him such a great grace.